Welcome to the American Banjo Museum and another of our virtual tours. My name is Johnny Byer. It's a delight to welcome you as we get over the hump of the COVID-19 thing and start to get somewhere on the road to being normal again. Our museum is still closed to guests. We want to be as safe as we can for our guests, for our staff, and for everybody involved. But somewhere in the near future, we're going to be able to open our doors and welcome you again. Until that time, we're going to try and fill your banjo fix on a daily basis with some of the stuff that's going on behind the scenes as we've got our doors closed. Tomorrow, we're going to be doing a video of the guys cleaning the carpet, so make sure to tune in for that. But no, we're not. No, don't get your hopes up. We're just kidding. But we are having the carpet cleaned tomorrow, and we're getting caught up on a lot of stuff. One of the things that we've been doing while the doors have been closed is getting ready for a brand new exhibit. Entitled Women of the Banjo, this exhibit points out how much influence women have had in the ongoing evolution of the banjo. It's been a really eye-opening experience doing the research on this exhibit. There are many women who, had they not existed, none of what you see going on all around us would have taken place. So we wanted for many years to do something where we could pay tribute to some of the women, and we can't pay tribute to every single one of them because there's a lot of them. But when it comes down to standouts, who really made the banjo where it is today, we've got a good cross-section of some of those women. Why don't you follow me and you'll see a work in progress here, folks. Nowhere near ready to open, but you're going to start to see how this is all coming together. What we've done in this exhibit is start in the very beginning. Back in the mid-1800s, while the banjo was really a rough and tumble instrument, the women were primarily sequestered away from playing the banjo. It took some gender-breaking performers to get the banjo out into the female hands and to play out in public. I know it sounds absurd by today's standards, but there was a time when women simply did not perform out in public. Performing as part of a troupe was a man's job, and there were some specific women who changed all of that. We had people like Teresa Vaughan and Dorothy Kenton, and one of the most popular performers was Lotta Crabtree. She was, when she died, one of the wealthiest women in America. We don't know if it was because of the banjo, but she certainly was a major factor in creating the, how should we say, awareness of the banjo and the fact that it was an instrument of all genders. Part of this exhibit that we are doing is trying to call attention to the fashions as they changed while women were playing the banjo. This wonderful Victorian era dress that we were able to get, very similar to what you might have seen Lotta Crabtree wearing, is just an illustration of how things have changed. The stature of women, very small and petite this woman was, whoever had this dress, but it is a beautifully crafted reflection of the time and a reflection of what a woman banjo player had to deal with in the 1800s. Imagine walking in front of an audience with a bustle behind you. That in itself would be a challenge. And you can turn yourself around and see just how the fashions change. When we had the flappers going crazy, we're doing the Charleston and and I'm a great Charleston dancer, but this Spangles, it's just a beautiful, again, reflection of the time. As we say, fashion is always reflected, decorative and architectural trends, and you can see the Art Deco influence starting to work its way into the early 1920s. We can go around this exhibit here, and I tell you what, let's take a look at this banjo over here, Lucas. This is a wonderful little thing, and as I say, the exhibit is not quite done yet, but one of the 1920s banjo stars, women stars, was a woman named Mabel Mori. She must have been either really good or really influential because she appeared in the Bacon catalog, she appeared in the Gibson catalog, she also appeared in the Paramount catalog. So she at one point was an endorser for those three companies. This right here is a Super Artist Supreme model from the Paramount Company, and this was made specifically for Mabel Mori. I don't know if the light will allow you to see, but her name is engraved on the armrest there, and it's got a number of unique decorative features unlike any other Super Artist Supreme. So that's part of our permanent collection here at the museum. Always great to be able to take a banjo and tie it right to a specific person that played it. In this case, we're talking about Mabel Mori. As we come around the corner, we're going to point out, again, this long evolution of the banjo. There was a period in time, like back in the 1800s, where women were not thought of as being banjo players. When women were sequestered in the Appalachian Mountains, any sort of outside music was done by men. But there were a lot of women in the Appalachian Mountains that played the banjo in the house for their family and friends. And basically, around the turn of the last century, some nonconformist women banjo players from that region took the banjo and made it a very popular instrument. You're going to find people like Molly O'Day and Cynthia May, they call her cousin Emmy Carver, and a number of other women featured in this little segment of the exhibit. They took the banjo and made it a commercially successful instrument being played by women, but they were also disseminating the styles that were played in Appalachia. So it's a really kind of a service they did for the banjo, keeping that rural folk style of the banjo playing and taking it to a commercial level that had never been heard before. In a similar manner, the type of playing that we call old time was taken to new levels with people like Peggy Seeger, Pete Seeger's half-sister, and again, introduced into the folk style of banjo, and modern players. We pictured Kathy Fink here, and of course, Bela Fleck's wife, Abigail Washburn, taking that clawhammer style to new musical levels and new musical audiences. So it's an ongoing evolution. It's an ongoing thing that women have come to their own and are finally getting their due respect and how should I say, acceptance in many worlds of the banjo. In the world of bluegrass, that was really a man's world for many, many years. And it took pioneers such as Alice Gerard and Ronnie Stoneman to set the way for people like Allison Brown, Kristen Scott Benson, and many of today's women of bluegrass banjo. As I say, it was a long process that some of the pioneers are hopefully getting some due recognition for their part in changing the way people think and how they heard and saw the banjo. Allison Brown's one of our new Hall of Fame inductees, and she sent over a piece of her stage attire, and ultimately we're going to get one of her banjos as well, so that will be part of this exhibit. As well as, how should we say, let's turn around here. I'm making Lucas dizzy here, but we also want to point out that the banjo carries with it a lot of racial baggage that no other instrument really has ever dealt with. And when we think about that, we want to point out that there have been a lot of strides made in that area. When today's or current generation of black banjo players realize the instrument's African heritage, and that needs to be stressed. There was a long period of time when African Americans were not aware of their banjo heritage. And about 20 years ago, there became this trend where you found a lot of African American banjo players embracing the banjo again and embracing the heritage of it. And that included female banjo players. So we want to make sure that the fact of the matter is there were many African American musicians who are doing their best to skillfully and respectfully call out injustices of the past while taking the banjo to new and different musical directions today. So one of the most prominent artists is Rhiannon Giddens, who was a founder of the Carolina Chocolate Drops. But there are a number of new and up-and-coming stars who are taking the how should we say, the foundation that people like Rhiannon set and running with it and healing a troubled past, a troubled part of our history. It's really gratifying to see that as being part of today's banjo evolution. Another part of banjo history that women have played a great role in is pop culture. While there are a lot of women banjo players who are not necessarily thought of as artistry, banjo players. They're more singers and guitar players and such. But when you take people like Taylor Swift or Dolly Parton or the Dixie Chicks or Ashley Campbell, and you put a banjo in their hands and put them in front of a mainstream audience, it becomes a point of pride for any banjo player to know that the banjo is in the hands of pop artists that are keeping it mainstream, and by doing that, they kind of make us really popular or look a little bit cooler than we actually are. So thanks to the pop women of the banjo. We move on a little bit to some of the people who are carrying on the torch. Back in the 1920s, as I say, banjo was a male instrument, but you had some, again, foundation set by those people who overcame gender bias in the 1920s, allowing people like Georgette Twain and Kathy Riley Finn, Debbie Schreier and Cynthia Sayer, and many others. Believe me, again, we wish we could include every name possible, but we wanted to grab onto some of the names that are really familiar, and by the way, all four of these names are part of our Hall of Fame. So it is a great thrill for us to be able to point out their accomplishments in carrying on the torch for those people that set the path many years ago in keeping the four-string banjo player, I should say the four-string banjo, in front of a mainstream audience. And then finally, we wanted to pay attention to some of the teachers and builders. That's a huge factor. There was a time when teaching was strictly thought of as being a man's or a woman's place. Men weren't teachers and women were teachers. But as teaching became kind of a gender neutral thing, in the bluegrass world, you had people like Murphy Henry and Janet Davis, and some of the earlier banjo instructors who were like Lily Mae Lefford. They were instructing guys like Ralph Stanley and Grandpa Jones and other banjo icons that wouldn't exist had it not been for having women banjo teachers. And then we get to building of banjos. You have a lot of banjo makers around the world. These days, most of the time, they're small boutique makers. But you have some of the major companies as well, such as the Deering Company and the Ohm Company out in Colorado. Well, what you're going to see with those two particular companies is a generational woman connection. Of course, with Deering, Greg and Janet Deering started the company, but now their daughter, Jamie Deering, has got a lot of banjo savvy and business savvy and is picking up the reins. Pretty much the same with Chuck Augsbury and his daughter Tanya, taking on the reins as she's another banjo executive, making sure that that company keeps going forward. The banjo is going to go forward. It's going to happen with the help of a lot of people, and a lot of those people will be women. So as we thank and pay tribute to the women of the banjo, we'd like to thank you for tuning in to the American Banjo Museum Virtual at Noon. For the time being, we're going to continue to fill your banjo fix on a daily basis till we can get our doors open and you can come see this stuff in person. It'll be exciting because Dolly Parton's going to be sending over one of her banjos, and we've got other things coming. One of Kathy Riley's stage attire dresses is on its way as well. So we've got other things coming in to add to this exhibit and make it even more interesting than I think it is right now. But for right now, thanks again for tuning in. Keep your donations coming in. Please become a member of the American Banjo Museum. We'd love to have you as part of our family. Right now, we're going to sign off for today, but ask you to stay tuned because Lucas is going to hook you up with some videos of some women of the banjo, so you'll get a chance to see some of the faces and names that you were just introduced to in action. For now, my name is Johnny Byer. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, bye-bye.